Yes, indeed. We are back. Hello there. Glad you chose to click that link. Um, as you have rightly guessed, this is Harry Potter Abridged. And in this episode of Harry Potter Abridged, we are continuing on to Chapter 8 of the Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And Chapter 8 of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is entitled Flight of the Fat Lady. Yes, it's true. That's the name of the chapter. And so we're going to do it, is what we're going to do. Infer what you will. So we, we ended with the lesson with the boggart, which was obviously in the boggart in the wardrobe chapter, and with Harry kind of feeling a little down, because, he was like, why did Lupin stop me from fighting the boggart? Does he think I'm weak? Does everybody think I'm weak? What's going on? Self-doubt is manifesting in our young dear Potter. So we move on. The last two chapters were sort of like the first lesson in every class except for history of magic and like herbology, which we're going to get to here. But anyway, because we've kind of covered that, now we're moving, like everything was like the first day, and now we're like moving along in time a little bit, and so we learned that Defense Against the Dark Arts, of course, has become most people's favorite subject, but of course Draco Malfoy, because he's Draco fucking Malfoy, is the only one who has anything to say about him. And of course he has to talk about his physical appearance, like the state of his robes and things like that, because Malfoy's been brought up to associate material wealth and nice things with like being important and powerful and like better, etc. So yeah. Anyway, the needless to say, the Draco Malfoy redemption arc starts pretty fucking late in the series, and it's even then it's. But I mean, you could argue. I mean, clearly some things change, and he doesn't. It seems that he doesn't live the way that that his parents lived. Let's just say that. Anyway, so yeah, and it's funny because that was that I made, and I forgot to watch the movie some more again before this, but in the last scene that I watched in the movie, I said that they kind of randomly stuck the Slytherins, even though you really just see Draco and Crabbe and Goyle, and it's only for like this purpose of having this, where like in the movie that's where he makes his comment about like, oh, this, more stuff about, oh, this place is, go into the dog, look at the state of his robes, all that kind of stuff. The stuff that he says here later, like in the hallways, if they pass him, he makes these comments. And for whatever reason, Harry's around enough. Like, that's one thing that I guess maybe it just happens when they're traveling between classes they have together. It doesn't seem... They have potions and care of magical creatures together with the Slytherins and the Gryffindors do, but those aren't directly one after the other, so they're never, I mean, I guess they might like sort of fall in line with each other, coming from different classes headed to the same one. I was just trying to like think of why Harry would, because this seems to happen in other parts in other books and other parts of books, whatever, where for whatever reason, stuff that Malfoy's saying in the hallways of let's just admit it, a fairly fucking large castle, that somehow Harry happens to also be walking by with Ron and Hermione a lot of the times, like as if their schedules were like very similar, and they're not. But again, there are going to be times where, like I said, that they're like, both coming from maybe different classes and on different floors, but like ending up in roughly the same place in the hallway because they're both headed to care of magical creatures outside, or are headed to potions in the dungeons or whatever. So anyway, but the point was that aside from Malfoy and his immediate circle, most people have decided that Professor Lupin's Defense Against the Dark Arts class is their favorite class. And we get an example of some of the other creatures they do, because it says that each lesson is just as exciting as the first. Although I gotta admit, like, nothing could be quite as exciting as the Boggart. Not that that's necessarily a fun kind of exciting. I'm just saying, like, having something come out and literally embody each person's worst fear. It's kind of personal. Just saying. We went through that before, though. They're kids. But for some of them, and this is why. Okay, right. Retreading. Moving forward. So they study red caps, which are like these little goblin-like things. And it's kind of weird that that's one of the creatures that they study, because they lurk in like places where there had been bloodshed. Like, where the fuck are the students going to be hanging out that were like, it's just like the dungeons of castles. Like, okay, I know they're in a castle, but like, and they technically have dungeon classrooms, but like, obviously those don't have red caps in them. So like, when potholes of deserted battlefields, like, I don't know. I'm just picking everything apart today. Don't mind it. I love it all. And then this is kind of funny. So I listen to the audiobooks a lot, but I'm also obviously reading the book. And right now I have, I assume that this wouldn't be any different anyway. But point being is that I've listened to it probably almost at this point more than I've read it. And I've read it a few times too. When I hear Stephen Fry pronounce Kappas, Cappas, in my mind, it sounds like he's saying Cappers with his British accent as the narrator. It's just the tendency to lop off the R's in words like that. That's just what it. So like when I was reviewing the physical chapter, and I have it right in front of me now, I'm reminded again that like that for a little while there, I had come to associate that with a different spelling in my mind, just because of the coincidental pronunciation thing. Vowels are funny, and well, just pronunciation in general. What am I talking about? This is about the lopping off of certain consonants. Anyway, righto. That's right. We have our grammar and pronunciation, our English versions, English class segment is what I was looking for. Our English language segment. Yeah, maybe not. Anyway, right. So, anyway, Kappas, as it is, are creepy water dwellers that look like scaly monkeys, which makes me think of the Wizard of Oz, except that those flew. But anyway, or maybe it's actually think of something else. I don't know. That's what came to mind, though. But while Defense Against the Dark Arts is going, so well, Harry is lamenting the fact that most of his other classes are kind of shit. Not to quote anyone, but a bit shit. And of course, the worst is potions. And ever since the word of what happened in the previous chapter with the Boggart Snape and being dressed in Neville's grandmother's clothes, Needless to say, things have Snape had heard about it, and he's not happy about it. So he hasn't exactly been, he's already an asshole in potions class to Harry and basically all of his friends, which basically means most of the Gryffindors. Although, admittedly, it does seem that he goes for the ones that Harry's actually closer to. He's more likely to pick on Hermione for being a know-it-all, or Ron for just fucking up in general. And then Neville, who I guess he knows that Harry's at least a little bit closer with because they're in the same. Well, I mean, they're all in the same year, but he doesn't really pick on Seamus or Dean, or any of the other Gryffindors. It doesn't seem like it's just the ones that are more in the immediate circle of Harry. But Neville, of course, is one, and you know. I mean, I say it all the time. I bitch about Snape a lot. But it's just like every time I think about it, it's like Snape was around. He knows what happens to Neville's parents. He knows what Neville's been through. And he didn't, from all that we know, have anything against them the way he did Harry's father, which is why he hates Harry. It just makes it like extra assholey for him to be the way he is towards Neville. And also he's an adult, so like hearing that Neville's worst fear was him. First of all, if he's being such an ass that he is, I'm surprised he didn't get some sort of grim satisfaction out of it. But hearing about like how Neville banished the Boggart, I mean, like, big fucking deal, dude. They're like what, 13-year-old kids, and you're a fucking what, 40-something-year-old man, or mid-30s at least. Like, come on, dude. But then again, the whole thing with him hinges on like a school time, school days grudge that he and romance that he hasn't let go of yet. So I guess to say stop dwelling on the past to Severus Snape is saying stop being Severus Snape. So there's that. Anyway, so yeah, so Snape's being himself. There we go. That was in short. And anytime like Lupin's name is mentioned, like he just like kind of like gives people like the death look and shit. The death stare. And then we also find out that divination is also another class that Harry's just like, because I mean, it's, I don't know. It's like that bad elective that you choose when you just don't know what else to choose, and then you end up in the class and you're like, you gotta be fucking kidding me! I'm taking this. This is what I have to spend. And for some reason, it seems like I don't know. Again, I don't know how their schedules or timetables, as it were, work out exactly. But like, why is it sometimes you hear about double divination or double potions? Also kind of odd again, because one is a class with two houses in it, and one is one with only one. Is it just like every, how do I say it? Or is it just certain terms that they have double periods, where like, or certain years that they have, or is it just like a rotating schedule where like you get double potions every, I don't know, 3 weeks or month or some, or somebody help me understand. Jorge, help. So yeah, Trelawney sucks. I mean, if you're Harry anyway, because I mean, all she does is her act, and then her act includes like fucking tears when she sees Harry, like, and just like consistently predicting his death, and like, it's ridiculous. But then of course you've got like other students, like specifically of course Parvati and Lavender, who like, worship Trelawney pretty much. And then, it seems like you don't really get a super bunch of information about it, but you kind of feel like there's most of the class is like somewhere in between. Like they're like, she seems kind of hokey, but it seems like she, remember Neville's cup, even though I know it's one of those other, I think it's like Lavender that says that, but still, and she didn't say remember, she said what about, I know. I don't know. Anyway, but the point is that it seems like some other people take her kind of seriously, at least, even if they think that she's like over the top. And then it doesn't really seem like, but maybe Harry, Ron, and Hermione are like the most skeptical. Maybe it's because of Harry's situation, even though Harry, right now at this point, anyway, I guess now that I think about it, he is skeptical of her in a lot of ways, but at the same time, like, he saw this dog, and that makes it hard for him to completely dismiss everything to do with divination, even if he's not a big fan of Trelawney herself. So yeah. Right, and then like on top of it, they have one class with one of their favorite people at Hogwarts, Hagrid, but Care of Magical Creatures has turned out to be like a very boring class now because Hagrid's like lost his swag, and so he's scared to like do anything else that's interesting, because he's afraid he'll get fired before he's even gotten like established in the job. And even though that's very unfortunate, it's not completely shocking that would happen. I mean, as we've discussed on several different occasions, Hagrid is he's an interesting character because his confidence is shaken fairly easily when it comes to certain things, especially things that he doesn't feel 100% sure of himself in, which is a lot of things. I mean, caring for the magical creatures themselves, he feels extremely confident about and is extremely good at. But for some reason, even though he's really good at that, like, when somebody in authority or power, like, questions him, he, like, or even sometimes when the students question him, he just doesn't do well with, like, people, like, outright seeming like to distrust or make fun of, or anything that sort of like derails him. It like derails him kind of hard. Now, granted, I know the accident with Malfoy was like a big deal, in the sense that it was like a student got injured, and yeah, sure, maybe they were a little early with hippogriffs, but he told them exactly what to do, and he guided them through it perfectly. I mean, and Harry had no problem. And this is one time where him being Harry Potter didn't mean anything, like, other than the fact that because he happens to be a friend of Hagrid, he was the one who sort of like stepped forward, like, fuck, fine, I'll do it. So in that sense, it was because he was Harry Potter. But as far as like his success with Buckbeak and flying him and all of the things, like, everybody else did it fine too. It was only Malfoy, because he wasn't listening. He still managed to do the first part right. It was when he actually like insulted directly the hippogriff that Buckbeak, hit him with the talons. So yeah, it's just like, I don't know. It's a shame, because it's like Hagrid should have like one of the coolest classes, is really my point. Like he knows about so many things, but because he has trouble like drawing the line and knowing what the distinction is, which I don't understand that. Like, is there not any curriculum? Is every teacher allowed to just write their own? I guess that must be the case, because every Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher is completely different. Granted, most of them aren't even real teachers, except for like Lupin, and even fake Moody is actually a good teacher, relatively speaking. But I still, well, anyway, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Because Moody is for another book. So anyway, yeah, so nobody's really enjoying Care of Magical Creatures. It's just turned into like, blah. So they're like feeding flobberworms with lettuce. I mean, it's just like it's yeah, and that sucks. I mean, because like I said, that should be an exciting and kind of fun class. But then it's I don't know. I've always thought that was kind of a strange like situation to like maintain because from now on that's sort of like the plight of Hagrid. Like start off with like something that he thinks is exciting, and either something goes really bad wrong with it, or it just doesn't go over as well as he expected it to, or whatever, and then he retreats to just like, you know, like well with the blasted Scroots, like he keeps like what he ends up having to do is like minimize their contact with them over the course of the term, and to the point where they're just like in boxes. And so it's just like I don't know. It doesn't. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense in a way, but it's like you'd think that he'd be the kind of person that like after a while he would get his sort of his thing figured out, and like would be like, okay, I know what to do. Like, I mean, because it's like you're doing the same thing every year, basically. You're teaching a certain number of years about care of magical creatures. You should be able to come up with lists. It shouldn't. I mean, and I know he does plan his lessons. Obviously, he does, but I don't know. And then I'm trying to remember. There's the Thestrals thing, and then I feel like after that he kind of goes back to like really simple shit too because of Umbridge, and it's just like I don't know. There's just all kinds of problems with Hagrid. It's like it seems unfair that he never gets to have like a good year teaching. Like you kind of feel like maybe if nothing went wrong but them having it with the Slytherins like creates that constant conflict. It's like Slytherins just shouldn't even get to take care of magical creatures. Or maybe they could have it with the Ravenclaws, and the Ravenclaws would be able to like put them in their place or something. I don't know. Whatever. We have to have that extra Harry and Malfoy conflict, so you got to have two classes. And of course, why not have the one where Malfoy is not only against Harry and his friends, but also against the teacher, just to add like lots of extra tension without having to. I mean, it's inevitable with the combination of characters that are there. So, yeah. Right, and so finally, October arrives, and with that, there comes mention of Quidditch, and Oliver Wood is in his final year this year. And he really, 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 really wants to win the Quidditch Cup. You can't blame him. He's been the captain for 3 years, and I gotta imagine that's what it is. I would be willing to bet there was some other player that was captain before Wood. I mean, obviously, but I mean before like I doubt that he was the captain his first and second years. What the fuck I'm trying to say. Um, so I get the feeling that like he started his captaincy the year that Harry started school is my fucking point there. So anyway, so it's time for Wood to give his speech before they even start training. It's like this is our last chance, or my last chance anyway. And Wood's, I don't know, like I said before, I like Wood. He's fiercely into Quidditch, but he's not. He's like the good version of a. I mean, a lot of people who play sports are good people. Don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, like he exemplifies like all of the good things about a competitive sports player. I feel like. But obviously he wants to win. I mean, and you're gonna play something like this for all 7 years of school. You'd like to win. So I don't blame him. Wait a minute. You know what? I just realized that I wasn't doing the math earlier, right? Somebody else has probably already figured that out. But it just occurred to me that I was like doing a hybrid math or something between like Harry's years in school and his, but not accounting for the fact that this is his 7th year, not 5th. I don't know where I was getting that from, but that's what I think I was doing. So wait a minute. he's been playing Quidditch probably not for 7 years because Harry's the youngest player in like a century or something. So that means he probably started second year because he's good. So he probably made the team his first time around. So that means this is his 6th year playing. I'm still going to say probably his 3rd year as captain. Maybe he was made... He started playing his 2nd year. That's still 5 more years. Whatever. I don't know. You know what? What's worse is this is probably on like Pottermore or something, but I'm not gonna go look right now. It's really not important, right? It's not. I know. I'm sorry. But we do tangents here. We do that. You probably knew that coming in. Anyway, it's Wood's last year, and he's making a speech, and he does that, and he breaks down everybody. And he's like, we got the best chasers, and we got the best beaters, and in the midst of this, of course, like Rowling uses this little segment to get her exposition reminders in because it's the first mention of Quidditch in this novel. Like, and by the way, the beaters who are equipped with heavy bats to repel the bludgers, which are also happen to be these 2 heavy black balls, which zoom through and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, okay, cool, very good. Just in case we're 13 and we hadn't read the last book in a year, and it's cool. It makes sense. It's cool. She does it very deftly. It's like it's minimal. Like she does it less and less as the books go on. In fact, well, I don't know. I feel like there's some in the 4th book. I mean, maybe she never completely stops, but she does it. I don't know. I don't think there's any of it in the 6th and 7th book, hardly. I'm probably wrong about that, though. She does love to do it. Or maybe she doesn't. Maybe she's just convinced that she needs to. Whichever. And then... So yeah, basically we get like hang on. No, I take that back. Actually, that's before. I'm sorry, that's before the speech. So no, she really does give the full breakdown of the fucking of the game. Which, by the way, I do think Quidditch is awesome. Don't get me wrong. I think it would be like an amazingly fun game to play. It's kind of insane, and it's kind of amazing that she actually invented a sport, which is basically like 2 games in one, or like 2.5 games in one, because it's like the game that the Chasers are playing is its own game. Because I mean, they're playing like an airborne version of like some cross between like, soccer / football, and like basketball and like whatever, most of the games that involve like there being 2 goals at the end, except that this has 3 at each end. And then like you've got the Seekers game with just basically like 2 people like trying to find a random flying ball that's like completely unrelated to the rest of the game, except that they might have to fly in between them sometimes, but most of the time they're able to like fly above the rest of the game. And so like that's just like a hide and seek kind of game that involves 2 people trying to find something and then getting to it first when one of them does, or they both do. And then you've got like the weird, like, see, I'm doing it anyway. I'm doing it. Why not? But I was just thinking about how it's interesting, like that she created like such an interesting game, and that it really is sort of like multiple games in one. But obviously they work in tandem, obviously scoring wise, but they have enough shit to do with each other otherwise. But then like the bludgers are what sort of like tie the 2 games together, because they can be used to distract or like throw off course or injure either set of players. So I don't know. I think it's. I mean, granted, the Buzzers was like a bit of a brutal thing to add into a game that otherwise is kind of. I mean, it's somewhat physical because they do run into each other sometimes, and like, they're having to like fly their brooms and use their legs a lot and throw the ball around and everything. Because I know before I kind of was arguing that it was more of a game than a sport, but then I was talking to Adva and she kind of set me straight, and I started thinking about it some more, and then I started thinking about the multiple games in one thing today, and now I'm just like, yeah, okay, fine, it's a sport. Um, but yeah, I sometimes I'm just like, man, if we could really get some when not if when we get some better virtual reality in the world, it would be pretty fucking awesome to be able to like mount a virtual broom and put on the rig and like play Quidditch in a like virtual 3D environment. I would do that. I would so fucking do that. Especially like if it has, I mean, by the time something like that's available, it will, like, where it'll have like all the force feedback and stuff. And I mean, obviously there'll be some things that you won't, when you crash, obviously you're not going to get physically hurt, but the broom will still be facing down and you'll have to hold yourself on it and stuff like that. And yeah, anyway, stuff and stuff. Yeah, Quidditch, kind of cool. Mm-mm-mm. So yeah, I said it, but yeah, Wood does his speech. I mean, he like I said, he calls everybody out, and Fred and George are like, "Oh, you're embarrassing us, stop." Um, and and it is funny how many times Fred and George say the same thing together too. Like they are Wonder Twin powers activated for real. And he's like, he like names everybody, and he's like, and me, and they're like, yeah, we think you're good too. You're fine, Oliver. And of course, it's funny because Oliver actually goes on to play, uh, uh, in like the minor leagues or something like that, or maybe I can't remember something. He goes on to play professionally. Um, so yeah, he's like, we got to do it, and his speech is so impassioned, and he seems so like determined that they're all like, yeah, dude, we're gonna do it, man, we're totally gonna do it. And so yeah, so then they start practicing. And so we're moving forward in time. The weather's changing, colder, wetter, nights darker. That means days shorter. Um, but they're all like, I mean, this is like the best team that Harry ever plays on. Let's just be real about it. Everything from this point forward, Quidditch wise, is a bit of a toss up. I mean, it gets good towards like, well, but right before Harry ends up like fucking it up for himself again. Like this is the last year that Harry's able to really and truly enjoy playing Quidditch. Because there's no Quidditch the next year. Um, and then he gets banned like early on in the fifth year, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it at the end? No, 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 no. They just won a game, but they didn't win the whole thing. So he gets banned along with Fred and George. Then, of course, Umbridge is gone, so then the ban's lifted, so he's the captain. But then it's like his team's not as good, and Ron's got problems, uh, and then he ends up getting in trouble anyway, and fucks it up, and like can't play at the end, but he ends up with Ginny, so there's like the compensation, but he doesn't actually play in the championship, so they win it without him. And then of course he doesn't go to school year 7. So this is it. It's funny. I never thought about that, but Oliver keeps saying this is it. This is our last chance. Well, it's kind of Harry's last chance too. He just doesn't have any way to know that. But it is. This is like the best team that he plays on, and it's like nobody changes the first 3 years. It's Alicia, Katie, and Angelina, Fred, George, Oliver, and Harry. And like that's like the fucking all-star team of this whole like era of his schooling. Not to say that Ron doesn't end up getting his shit together in the end too, but it's just like there's never like an all-around team that's better than this one. So point being is that Wood's right. And he's more right than he realizes. So anyway, so Harry's like kind of like the point being too is that the mention of the Quidditch is also to say that, you know, even though the only class Harry seems to really enjoy, and really most of his classmates for that matter, is Defense Against the Dark Arts, and the rest of them kind of suck. But now he's got Quidditch practice, and flying is one of those. Flying is Harry's like playing music. It's the thing that he does, quote unquote, on the side that brings him the most joy, and I can sort of understand that. Because I think if I was ever good at a sport, that's probably how I would feel about the sport. But since I'm a musician, I feel that way about playing music. So he's getting to do something that he really enjoys 3 nights a week, even though it's in like shitty weather and all that. But so there's a silver lining in his crappy schedule. And then he comes in one evening from that class, all cold and stiff and shit. And everybody in the common room's all like talking and buzzing excitedly. And so Harry's like, "What's up?" And Ron's like, "Everybody's going to Hogsmeade. Everybody's going to Hogsmeade." "Oh, you're not going to Hogsmeade, are you?" He didn't say it like that, but Harry's like immediately like, "Oh, right," and it's on Halloween weekend too, so it's like. It's really shitty. It's like the ideal time to be able to go into a wizarding village is on Halloween weekend. Like, can you imagine? Can you fucking imagine? The decorations, the things that you get to eat. Come on, man. So yeah, and of course this is also the first year that they're able to go, and of course things didn't exactly go the way that maybe Harry was hoping they were going to go, because he had a deal with Uncle Vernon about getting the form signed, and of course that didn't work out with the whole blowing up his aunt thing. Although again, I just think that if they could have just modified their memories, but then again, Harry was gone either way, so they couldn't take that part out of the equation, I guess. Maybe that's why they didn't try to modify their memory. Well, they could have told him something else. They could have been like, "Well, we came and picked up Harry early for XYZ reason." They could have made up something. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Point being, he didn't get the form signed, and because he didn't get the form signed, everybody's going but him. And Hermione's all like, "Oh, you'll be able to go next time. It'll be fine." And Ron's like, "Just ask McGonagall. It'll be fine." And Harry's like, "All right, I'll try." And then we have a Crookshanks and Scabbers incident, because there's a few of those in this book. And so Crookshanks shows up on the scene eating a spider, and of course Ron's revolted because he hates spiders. He's scared of them. And he doesn't really like Crookshanks that much right now anyway, because of the whole Scabbers thing. And Ron's like, "Well, I got Scabbers in my bag here asleep, so just keep him over there, all right?" And so Harry's doing homework, blah, 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 blah. Ron offers to let Harry copy his. Hermione's disapproving, but then all of a sudden, Crookshanks like pounces on the bag, which Hermione in a minute tries to play off like "Oh, that's nonsense that the cat knew she says that Ron says that the cat is weird and that it understood what he said and he knew that that Scabbers was in the bag, and Hermione's like, "Oh, he smelled Scabbers," which I guess that's like a logical thing to think, but Ron, sometimes Ron's intuition is good. It's kind of strange. Other times he's hidden away the fuck out there with his theories and shit. But anyway, so he's like whirling the bag around and trying to get Crookshanks off the bag, and then Scabbers jumps out of the bag, and then Crookshanks jumps off the bag, and so there's the whole thing, and they chase each other, and well, not Crookshanks chases Scabbers, let's put it, and Scabbers like manages to hide underneath something or other, an old chest of drawers, and then Crookshanks is like trying to get to him, and so they run over, and Hermione gets Crookshanks, and Ron's all like, losing his shit. He's like, look at him. He's skin and bones. So anyway, and so that's when Ron says about the it heard me say that Scabbers was in my bag, and Hermione's like, that's rubbish, and blah, blah, blah. And so they're, that thus begins, like spat number 25,000. No, we're still fairly early on, but, thus begins another Ron and Hermione spat. So Ron goes off to bed, and so the next day they're still like not talking to each other for the most part, and and Hermione's like trying to ask him how Scabbers is, and blah blah blah. Not really a whole lot going on in herbology, pufferpods. We don't really hear much about what they are, though, except that we do see a demonstration because Ron knocks them off the table and they like bloom into being right there. And then they're heading to Transfiguration, and they get there and get to the line, and Lavender Brown is all crying, and Parvati is consoling her, and this is kind of like where we get into, like, well, not kind of, this is where we get back to like this whole thing about divination and how like there's some people who just don't have any patience for it, and Hermione being one of them. And Hermione and McGonagall like are like very much in sync on this thing, even if they don't both realize it yet. So anyway, so Lavender finds out that her rabbit was killed by a fox. Poor Binky, the bunny. And she's like equating this with something that Trelawney said, like, the thing that you dread, it's going to happen on October 16th or whatever. And so this is October 16th, but of course Hermione being like, I mean, she's just a very logical person. She's like, but is it an old rabbit? No, she's a baby. Well, then how could you have been dreading her dying? Because she should have a full life ahead of her. And it didn't actually happen on October 16th. You just found out today. And so, she's trying to like explain it all logically, but of course nobody really wants to hear it. And Ron's like, well, don't worry, don't worry, Lavender. Hermione doesn't really care about other people's pets or doesn't think they're important or whatever. So the spat continues or intensifies, as it were. So anyway, so McGonagall opens the door at that point, and they're able to go in. I might have not fleshed out the full, but you get the idea. That's pretty much what happened. So anyway, yeah, they're really pissed with each other, and so they're sitting on opposite sides of Harry and not talking, and meanwhile, Harry's like just, in his own world, like trying to figure out how he's going to get McGonagall to convince, or not, how he's going to convince McGonagall to let him go into Hogsmeade. So anyway, they get to the end, and before Harry can get to that point to go up to the to her desk, McGonagall goes ahead and informs the class that, hey, by the way, since you're all in my house, permission forms for Hogsmeade to me. No form, no Hogsmeade, bitches. That's what she said. I've got the unabridged edition. Um, and of course, we just have to have a little bit of Neville. And he's like, "Oh, I think I lost mine." And she's like, "Your grandmother sent yours, Neville. It's cool." So anyway, so Harry waits for everybody to leave, and Ron's kind of egging him on, and he's like, "Okay." And of course, McGonagall sees him coming, and so she's like, "Yeah, what you want?" And he's like, see, what had happened is I ain't giving a form sign because my aunt and uncle, and they don't really know about Hogwarts forms, and so maybe no. She's like, yeah, no, sorry, no. And with McGonagall's really good at like not showing too much of how she feels underneath about something unless she's really pissed or really upset. But you get like you often get like little just glimpses from her, and Harry gets one of those here. What is it? How is it described? She turned to look at him with an odd expression on her face. Was it pity? So it's like, for a moment there, she betrays her emotions. Like, she's like, damn it, why does, because she knows that, like, it shouldn't be this way. Like, truth be told, she knows that he's raised by and lives with these horrible muggles. Not horrible because they're muggles, we know this. But anyway, I mean, she witnessed it from the first day that Harry went to live there. She knows. And if there wasn't all this shit surrounding him and that this specific thing was Sirius Black, she probably would bend the rule. Nobody else would have to know about it. It wouldn't be that big of a deal. Everybody else is going, and if he had like even remotely decent guardians, he'd be going too. But instead, she has to tell him no. She has to enforce the rule. I mean, and yes, McGonagall is pretty strict, but she also waived the first year rule to make him the Gryffindor Seeker in his first year. So sometimes if it's not going to be dangerous in her mind, not that playing Quidditch can't be dangerous, but still, most of those injuries are mendable pretty easily in the magic world, the wizarding world. She's occasionally willing to do it, and I honestly think that were the situation not what it was, and knowing what she knows about Harry's situation, that she would actually do it now. So I think, that what Harry's pretty good at reading faces, and McGonagall shows what she wants to sometimes, I think sometimes too. I think she's kind of like, in a way, it's like she's letting him know, like, I'm sorry, dude. Like, I wish I could, but I can't. And it's just like when even though Fudge is a different character altogether, but he has to do something similar, and it's like, it's like, Fudge is definitely somebody who's wishy-washy on allowing the rules. So again, if it wasn't for the Black situation, Fudge probably would have been like, sure, I'll sign your form, fuck it, but no. So anyway, so she's like, yep, that's my final word. So get on to your next class, and so that's that. And of course, Ron's like sticking up for Harry and saying not so nice things about McGonagall. Meanwhile, Hermione's like, well, I'm sure this is all for the best. Meanwhile, Harry's just like, God damn it. I just wanted to get out of the castle. And Ron's like, well, there'll be the feast for Halloween. That'll be cool. And Harry's like, yeah, that'll be great. That'll be just fucking great. And and he knows that it will be great, but it's like, it would just, if I could just go to the place, it would be better. So anyway, so nothing really like makes him feel better. And of course, like, as is often the case with things like this, once you've like confessed to the fact that you don't have your form signed, somebody's like, oh, by the way, I'm really good at forging signatures. And that's what happens with Dean. And he's like, yeah, but I already told her. It's too late. So, and then fucking Percy, who's just like the most straight-laced fucker on earth, he's like, oh, it's no big deal, Harry. You're not missing anything. I mean, sure, the sweet shop's good, but Zonko's downright dangerous. Or does he say frankly dangerous? I'm like, come on, man. It's just like, that's not helping anybody, Percy. Like, you ain't fooling nobody, son. Anyway, so Halloween comes and Harry, like, this is kind of great. Like, just to kind of like exemplify the bonding and friendship between Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Like, well, first of all, Ron and Hermione have like dropped their little feud over their pets in favor of like comforting Harry and like trying to be as like consoling and cool about the fact that he's going to be left behind from and separated from the rest of the class. So they're like, we're going to bring you back blunts of sweets and like whatever we can bring back for you. Yeah, like we're your friends. And Harry, and like instead of like, even though he's feeling like really down, he's like, oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. I'll be good. Don't worry. He's like he's not making them feel bad for being able to go enjoy themselves, which sometimes people will do. So it's like they're both like being like, or all of them are being like really good friends right here. It's kind of a nice little picture of that. Snapshot, as it were. And he's like, I'll see you guys at the feast. Have a good time. Peace out. So, meanwhile, he's like, I'm sure he didn't exactly fool them, but at least, like, he didn't say anything like, oh, well, you guys, sure, I bet you'll have lots of fun. He puts on the best face he can, Anyway, so he goes and roams around the halls, and he manages to, like, get back to the common room, and he's just, he's bummed. And of course, as soon as he gets to the common room, there's like a bunch of first and second years there, and that means that Creevy's there, Colin, and he's like, oh, Harry, ha, ha, and he's like, come sit with me and my friends, and Harry's like, no, sorry, I gotta go back to the library. And I don't really blame him. I'm sure Colin's friends are nice and all, but they're when you're that age in school, like those kids are probably annoying as fuck. Anyway, not to mention that because it's Colin, like it would just be like 20,000 questions with Harry Potter, So anyway, so now he heads right back out of the common room, and the fat lady's pissed because he woke her up, of course. So he's like wandering towards the library, and he's like, I don't actually want to go to the library. So he turns around again, and then he comes face to face with Filch because why not? And Filch is just heading back, from seeing all the students out of the castle and checking his list and all that good shit. And, Filch is just like, what are you doing? Rawr! And Harry's just like, man, like, And he's like, go back to your common room. So Harry's like, yeah, I'm not going back to my common room, but I'll just wander off in that general direction. So he does, and then at this point, he's like, well, maybe I'll go to the Owlery and go see Hedwig, it's just something. Like, just that listless depression of just like, I don't really have shit to do, and yet I don't really want to just go sit in the common room either, so it's just like wondering. Anyway, so he's wandering through a hallway, and then he hears somebody call his name, and he's like, whoa, who's that? And he looks back, and Lupin, Professor Lupin, has his face sticking out his door. And so he realizes, or he finds out that Harry is alone because Ron and Hermione are in Hogsmeade. And see, this is like from the get-go, like Lupin is such a like good example of just not just a good teacher, but a good human being. Like he's like, what are you up to? Where are your friends who I know that you're with all the time, And then when Harry answers, he's like, oh. And of course he understands because he knows that Harry doesn't have the form most likely, and why nobody's going to let him go because of Black. So he's like, well, how about you come in and have some tea with me? And he's like, oh, okay. And so then he shows Harry a new magical creature that's coming up in one of their classes, the Grindylow. And the Grindylow is a water demon. And then this is actually a character that, or not character, a creature that will show up in the next book when Harry is at the bottom of the lake. So we get, again, this book starts to do more foreshadowing than any of the books have done together. I mean, they've both done some, but this book has all kinds. Anyway, and we're told that the trick is to break their grip because they have like these long fingers that are really strong, but they're brittle. So that's like Harry's little lesson. Even though I'm sure obviously he's going to have the class on it later too, but we don't witness that class in the book. But this information comes in useful in the next book when he needs to escape one or more than one because they've grabbed him because he's near the bottom. Because that's what they do. So anyway, so they have some tea, and Lupin makes a tea leaves joke because he's heard about what happened to him in divination class, and Harry's like, "How did you?" He's like, "Yeah, McGonagall told me." He's like, "Right then." And Lupin asks him if he's worried, and he's like, Nah. I mean, he's not super casual, but he's like, no. And he thinks about telling Lupin about the dog he saw in Magnolia Crescent, but he decides not to. And I highlighted this next line because of where I am right now in the seventh book. It says here, he didn't want Lupin to think he was a coward. Well, in book 7, he calls Lupin a coward. So that's interesting. I wonder if that was on purpose or not, because I mean it is between these two characters, but it's also like 4 books apart. So it's hard to know if she was planting that little thing in there or not. That's like bordering on like the Preston Jacobs style of like, well, in this book she said this, therefore it means that this, and this is related to this, which calls an homage back to this. You know. I love Preston, by the way. I'm just saying that like it's that kind of chain of logic thing that's built on logic that's not certain to begin with. Makes for fun speculation, though. Anyway, so yeah, Harry doesn't want Lupin in this case to think that he's a coward, so he doesn't mention the. And it's kind of a shame because I mean I'm sure Lupin could have had some things to say to comfort Harry because he's like that. But he doesn't want to bring up the dog because of the Death Omen thing. So, but he looks troubled, and so Lupin's like, "Well, anything bothering you?" And first he's like, "No, good." And he has a little bit more tea, and he's like, "Yeah, actually, see about that. How come you didn't let me fight the boggart?" And Lupin's like, instead of saying, "What do you mean? Not let you fight the boggart?" He says, "Oh, I thought that was obvious." And Harry's like, "Oh, you didn't deny it. Cool." So again, we have like Lupin just being like very, Lupin is very Dumbledore-like in a lot of ways, and I mean he is kind of he's one of those people that I call like I think I may have said this before probably. Like Dumbledore's like adopted children sort of, or adopted sons in a lot of cases, for whatever reason. But like Hagrid's one of them too, and Lupin is, and Harry sort of becomes too, and yeah, the boys that like I mean, and even at one point Tom Riddle kind of, it's just that Tom walled himself off pretty early on, but yeah, it's just the people, and I'm sure there are probably others that we just don't ever hear about. But Dumbledore has a soft spot for people who have a rough time in life. Especially when it's not really their fault, which is why Harry's like the prime example. But with Lupin, it's the same thing. I mean, he was bitten as a child. He didn't ask to be a werewolf. Right. Surely we're past these spoilers at this point, right? Um, I mean, if you just started listening to this episode, you might be like, "Oh fuck, man, you just dropped that." But like, if you've been listening to the series up to this point, then you're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." Spoilers are gonna happen like that. But anyway, so what was my point? It was that Lupin's just like he's more Dumbledore-like in the sense that he's like instead of like dodging a question, he's either just gonna answer it or not answer it most of the time. And in this case, he's like, well, I thought that was obvious. And so Harry's like, well, why? And Lupin's like, well, I figured the Boggart would turn into Voldemort. And I thought that, people wouldn't really like to see Voldemort popping up in the middle of Hogwarts. And so he's like, well, apparently I was wrong. And Harry's like, well, I did think of him, but then I thought of those fucking Dementors. And Lupin's like, well, that suggests that the only thing you have to fear is fear itself. But yeah, he says yeah, he says that basically. Um, Lupin quotes Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That is who said that, right? Or was it Theodore Roosevelt? No, it was Franklin, I think. Whatever. Yeah. Anyway, he doesn't actually quote it, but he does say, he's like, oh, so what you're saying is that you fear above all things, and that's very wise, which it is, because fear is a motherfucker. So Harry's like, oh, well, that's a heavy concept for a 13-year-old. So Lupin's like, so you didn't think that I thought you could handle the Boggart? And he's like, well, yeah, that's exactly what I thought. I mean, you jumped right in front of me. And so now he's kind of feeling like, well, shit, this makes more sense now. And so he's, he's understanding now, like, because Lupin thought it was going to be Voldemort, and obviously nobody would want to see Voldemort, so he's not feeling so, like everybody thinks he's weak anymore, He's like, okay, this makes sense. And so then he's just about to start to ask Lupin more about the Dementors, because he has this desire to do something about this already, I think. Even though it doesn't come to fruition for a little while, actually, because he's like, so the Dementors, and then he's cut off. And when he gets cut off, Snape comes in, and Snape brings this goblet of a potion, goblet full of potion, whatever, for Lupin to drink, and it's not really explained what it is, except that Lupin says that he's been feeling a bit under the weather, and that there's a specific potion for what his problem is. He doesn't even really phrase it that way. He just says that there's what does he say? There's only this one potion that oh, he just says that I've been feeling a bit off color. This potion is the only thing that helps. That's what he says. Okay. But anyway, he explains that it's a very complex potion, and that he's lucky to be working with Snape, because he's the only person around that probably could make this potion anyway, because he said that he never was really good at it himself, which also makes me wonder, like, there's like some interesting things about Lupin. First of all, he seems to be the only one that fucking has like truly gotten over I mean, he doesn't like Snape really, but he doesn't hate him anymore either. Like, he recognizes that he works for Dumbledore, and if Dumbledore says he trusts him, he trusts Dumbledore, and that's all there is to it. I mean, I'm kind of quoting Lupin from later in another book, but that's clear here too in this situation. He doesn't hesitate to drink this potion. I mean, and of course, obviously, with Dumbledore right there, it's not like he would really need to fear anyway. But the point is he's thankful that Snape is making this potion for him legitimately. And Harry's all like, like in Harry's mind, it's just like, dun, 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 like, don't do it, don't drink the potion from Snape, don't do it. But Lupin's like, yeah, this is whatever. And Harry's like, well, Snape's really interested in the dark arts. And Lupin, like, does a really good job of, like, not giving in to what Harry's trying to do there. He's like, really? And he just keeps drinking. And Harry's like, some people reckon he'd do anything to get the Defense of the Dark Arts job. And Lupin finishes drinking. And doesn't actually, this is the one time he doesn't even address, and I think this was probably smart too. Like he instead of inviting Harry to like start giving all of his opinions on Snape, he's just like, well, I got to get back to work, Harry. I will see you later. And Harry's like, right, okay. And so, I mean, it's like the subject's over. And so, but it also completely cut Harry off from, and it's interesting because like all of that happening with Snape made their like their little talk and hangout like way shorter than it might have been, like because Harry was about to get into like talking about the Dementors and like might have even told, there's things that he's going to tell him later that he might have told him right then, but instead it just all, because of that Snape visit and the potion, it all ended. Anyway, so there's the end of that scene, and then so then it's like that afternoon, and Ron and Hermione bring him back all these sweets and fudge, and they hear a little bit about all the places they went. Dervish and Bangs, Zonkos, the Three Broomsticks. We hear about Butterbeer. We hear about the owls and the post office and like how they're like coded depending on how fast you want your litter to get there. And also I think that she left out that how far you want them to fly. But that's another matter. Honeydukes and the fudge. And then how that there's all kinds of people in the Three Broomsticks. And so Hermione, of course, is like, did you get any work done? And Harry's like, no, I had a cup of tea with Lupin, though. And then he explains the whole thing about, Snape coming in and bringing the potion and all that. And they're like, oh. And, then they're both, at this point, Ron and Hermione are both still predisposed against Snape. I mean, and that's sort of the point, is that, like, as the reader, you're kind of always supposed to be predisposed against Snape, at least the majority of the time. But I mean, not without reason, but I'm just saying. So anyway, but Hermione points out, well, even if he was trying to poison Lupin, he wouldn't have done it in front of Harry. And Harry's like, yeah, I guess not. So anyway, so they go to the feast, and it's sort of like a brief description of the feast, but it's like, a point, basically enough of a description to kind of like let you know that it was just as awesome as every other Halloween feast. And like, the ghosts do like a little presentation with some formation gliding, and Nearly Headless Nick does like his a reenactment of his own botched beheading, which is kind of crazy to think about. But so anyway, it's a nice evening, and so Harry's like leaves in a good mood, even after like, it's one of those things, like he didn't end up having a shit day. Like he left Ron and Hermione, they went to do their thing, and in his like depressed wondering, he ran into Lupin, and so he had like a positive encounter. Granted, again, with the time thing, I don't know what the hell he did with the rest of his day. He still had a few hours to kill, because I don't feel like he was in Lupin's office for even an hour, maybe 40 minutes at the most, because that Snape thing cut it pretty short. But nonetheless, it clearly he didn't have a horrible day, and then the feast was good. So he leaves, he's in a good mood, and of course, Malfoy's still trying to, like, give him shit about the Dementors. He's like, the Dementors send their love, Potter. And he's like, yeah, fuck you. And so they head back to Gryffindor Tower, but as they get closer to the end of the corridor with the fat lady, the hall is crammed and like blocked with students. Like, nobody's getting in. And they're like, what the fuck? And Harry's trying to look over the people in front of him, and it seems that the portrait is in fact closed. And then, of course, Percy shows up, and he's all like, let me through, I'm head boy. And so he gets up there, and he's like, uh-oh, somebody get Dumbledore, which is kind of a random thing to say. It's like, somebody call for help. It's like, wouldn't you like pick like one of your prefects and send them to Dumbledore specifically so that you know that somebody was actually going to get Dumbledore? Although sometimes I start to wonder if like maybe there isn't like if Dumbledore doesn't have like a thing set up like Voldemort does in Book 7, where like if you just say his name in a certain kind of way, or maybe if you just say it at all, like it like gives him like a window into what's going on around you right then in that moment, so he can be like, I needed to be there. I don't know. I'm probably not. But I mean, I just wonder, like, because Dumbledore always talks about watching people closely and stuff. I'm like, what else the fuck do you do? Like, how are you like? Does he have like magical ways of like putting like cameras in hallways, you know, without them actually being cameras? It just makes you wonder, like, what? Because he shows up pretty quickly. Is the point? Like, but who the fuck went to get Dumbledore? How? I don't know. I guess just somebody who would know. Anyway, but the point being is it doesn't seem very long at all. Like Ginny shows up and she's like, what's going on? And before you know it, next moment, as it says, Dumbledore's there. So he goes to the front of the line, and Harry, Ron, and Hermione are able to kind of like move up a little bit closer in his wake. And they see now like that the fat lady is gone and that the painting has been slashed viciously. There are strips on the floor of the canvas. And so and Lupin, Snape, and McGonagall are the three teachers that are chosen in this scene to be Dumbledore's sidekicks. I mean, again, we've explained why McGonagall's always going to be one of them, but it's just interesting. Like, not Sprout, not Flitwick, but Lupin and Snape. Anyway, but, you know, we got to have Lupin because he's an important character in this book, so. And so Dumbledore's like, all right, McGonagall, get Filch to search all the paintings. We got to find the fat lady. And then Peeves shows up, and he's all like, you'll be lucky. And Dumbledore's like, out with it, Peeves. And Peeves is like, okay, fine, I won't be quite as obnoxious because you're Dumbledore, and you could probably do something bad to me. Anyway, so Peeves goes on to explain that the fat lady is ashamed and doesn't want to be seen. She's a mess. She's been running through a landscape on the 4th floor, crying and all this. And so, you know, the fat lady's in a pitiable state, we shall say. And Dumbledore's like, well, aside from all that information, did she mention who did it? And then Peeves. And it's worth quoting what it says here. With the air of one cradling a large bombshell in his arms. He basically proceeds to say that this person who attacked her, he lost his temper when she wouldn't let him in. A nasty temper he's got, that Sirius Black. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, that's how this chapter ends. On a big fat, oh shit. Sirius Black's been in the castle? How the fuck did that happen with everybody? And it's, you know, we're going to learn, obviously, and everybody who's read it already knows, but, like, it is one of those moments where, like, in the first time that you're reading it, you're like, but seriously, how the fuck did Sirius Black get inside the castle? There's Dementors at all the entrances. They've tightened up security. Harry can't leave the grounds. Nobody's allowed out at night. Like, how did he just come up here in broad daylight and attack the fat lady? Like, the fuck, you know? So, yeah. So that's how that goes. But, you know, we got a chance to see a little bit more about how Lupin interacts with students, how open and like honest he is, and you can sense maybe that he has like a fondness for Harry, but he's not overdoing it. I mean, you know, we don't have any idea what his relationship is to Harry's father yet. We don't at all. But we just right now we can only if as you're going through the story the first time, this is just like he's a good teacher. That's and he's not being over the top in any way, but he's just a good teacher and he knows how to treat people and he's smart. So yeah. Oh, that was the other thing I was gonna say earlier. I said there were like a couple things about Lupin. The other thing I forgot, but it doesn't matter what the first thing was. I already said it. The second thing was, I wonder which of the four out of Lupin, Sirius, James, and well, obviously not Pettigrew, but out of that four, which was truly the like the smartest? Like who was? I only want to say the Hermione of the group because I mean I think they were all, at least those three, quite intelligent. But who do you think like had the easiest time on exams? The one who like just was, because it seemed like Lupin studied the hardest, but was that because it was actually harder for him, or was he really like the one who got the most A's? Sometimes I feel like it might have been Sirius or James. I don't know. They were all really smart, but I just wondered about that. I can't remember what it was now that made me wonder it. It was something earlier in this chapter, but anyway. Oh, because he said he wasn't a great potioneer or whatever. That's what it was. Um, that's what it was. Okay, and then let's see about. Hang on one second, everybody. Let's see about our comments here from the previous video. Make sure there's not any responses we needed to give. I think there may be. Yeah, we were talking about how Lupin in the previous chapter said that nobody knows what a boggart looks like when it's on its own, but obviously somebody does. And it's interesting too because it's what she brings up is that in the fifth book, Molly Weasley asks Mad Eye to check and see if there's a boggart in the drawing room, in the desk in the drawing room, and if nobody knew what a boggart looked like when they weren't transforming in front of somebody, then how the hell would he know what if that was a boggart in there? Because he uses his magical eye to perceive the boggart when, in return, the boggart cannot see him. In theory, anyway. I can't imagine. So I wish it would have been nice if there had been a way for us to find out what they actually look like in their non-transformed state. And then Jorge mentioned that recently he ended up at King's Cross for the first time, actually. And there's like a Harry Potter shop there, and a place where I've seen people take pictures at this place, and I must say that if I no, not if, when I visit King's Cross, I'm taking pictures there. They have the platform 9 3/4 wall, and there's like stuff like sticking halfway out of it, so you can like play along that you're going through the barrier. You goddamn right, I'm gonna take a picture there. Yeah, and Isildur realized after mentioning about Neville's parents and Lupin knowing them because of the Order, realized that I said that later on in the video. So yeah, it happened. I think. Oh. Jorge gave me a breakdown on how terms usually work. In England, with regards to Easter, we tend to have a 3-term system over here. Term 1 is September to Christmas. Term 2 is January to Easter, and term 3 is until July-ish. So, okay, that goes along with what we can kind of surmise for the most part. What else? Is anything else? I think that's it. All right, cool. thank you very much for listening. I look forward to any other comments or questions you have. And also, I was just thinking about this today, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, this is what it is. I mean, I do what I do. I don't really do a ton of editing. I just, I sit down. I beforehand, I usually listen to and or read the chapter at least once each, if not multiple times sometimes. Occasionally I watch some of the film stuff or read a little bit about like what other people have said about the chapter I'm doing. And then I try to like just sort of like give you my thoughts. You know what we're doing here. So my question is, are there any other types of things? And I'm not, again, nothing that goes very far off of what we're already doing. But if there's anything that you want, like for example, like I forgot to watch the section of the movie this time. Does me comparing the book to the movie, is that something that you like? I mean, things like that. Like, are there any other things like that you're interested in? I don't know. I just want to make it as entertaining as I can. That's all. If the answer is just keep doing what you're doing, then that's fine too. I mean, I like doing what I'm doing. I just thought about it. I like to bring the entertainment value as best I can out of something that's obviously not a ton of effort. I mean, I admit that. I mean, it's I just ramble and talk and tangent, and I very rarely edit anything, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, there we are. Like I said before, thank you for your listening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day part, and we will see you next time. Peace.